Welcome to Building Brawl. This is a wildcard guide to help you smartly build a great collection for Arena Singleton and build a good card collection for Eternal Singleton down the road or Eternal Brawl whenever it becomes available on Arena. Basically, if you have a few extra wild cards laying around and you don't know what to spend them on, snatch these cards up first. And today, we are talking about some of the best blue cards for Singleton, the best blue creatures. Now, there's not a ton of them out there, so unfortunately at this point in time during Arena's history, there's not a ton of super good blue cards out there, blue creatures. But as time goes on, we'll get a few more added in here. So there's kind of a little bit of a smaller card pool. But let's go and start off with one of the couple of the really good blue cards, and this can be Dream Eater. Dream Eater has Flash, which is always nice to have. This is definitely one of those things that you want to have in some sort of blue finisher for your control deck. It has Flash and Flying, and then whenever it enters the battlefield, you get to Surveil for 4. Whenever you do, return target non-land permanent opponent controls to its owner's hand. So one of the big things that you want in a Singleton format, whether it's Commander or Brawl or Singleton Arena, is you want to get some sort of 2-for-1. And Dream Eater is kind of like a 3-for-1. Enters the battlefield, you get to send something back to your opponent's hand. That's a nice tempo play. Then you get some card advantage with Surveil 4. You can dig for a little bit of answer. So this is just a really nice way to just generate a ton of value with Dream Eater. Now with Tempest Caller, enters the battlefield, tap all creatures target opponent controls. One of the hard ways for blue to kind of close the game out, if you're going for a controlling matchup, is, you can counter a lot of their stuff, but you don't really have that really good of board control. And so being able to get down Tempest Caller, tap down all of your opponent's creatures, that's going to give you a great way to swing in for a nice alpha swing. Really kind of help you get a huge chunk of damage in, or simply just close the game out with Tempest Caller. So both of those are excellent cards to pick up. Now, some of the not necessarily finisher. Yeah, I guess I can consider them finishers. We have Nez and Windreader Sphinx. Nez can't be countered. You have no max hand size, and whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, draw a card. So it's kind of like Niv Mizzet in a way. Discard 3 cards, exile it, and then return to the battlefield tapped at the beginning of the next end step. So if you're building a mono blue deck or some sort of blue deck and you want a pretty good finisher, Nez is pretty good. It can't be countered. You can be able to, if you have enough cards in your hand, you can discard those 3 cards to exile it and then bring it back. It's kind of like it's diving under the sea, which is really kind of cool to think about. But it's always nice to, where if this is your finisher for the deck, it's nice to have some sort of activated ability to make sure that creature sticks around to help you close the game out. So, especially if you're building, this becomes a brawl format, you're looking at a 3-turn clock swinging with Nez, pretty good. Windreader Sphinx, that is flying, and then whenever a creature with flying you control attacks, you may draw a card. Now, depending on what sort of deck you're building, if you have a lot of flyers, this is definitely a great way to help you close the game out. The fact that whenever a creature with flying attacks, you may draw a card, that's actually going to count for your creatures and your opponent's creatures. Yeah, so let's say your opponent swings in with a couple flying creatures, you get to draw a card, you swing in with some flying creatures, you get to draw a card. That's a great way for you to really get ahead on card advantage, and that's exactly what blue wants to do to kind of help it close the game out. It is a 3/7, which is kind of about dealing damage, but it kind of makes up for it in that really nice card draw. And that's definitely what you want to see in some sort of mono blue finisher. Now on to the next finishers. That's going to be Riddle Master Sphinx. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you may return target creature and opponent controls to its hand. A little expensive for 6 mana, and it's only a 5/5 flyer, but being able to kind of have that nice tempo play access to yourself, that's always nice to be able to bounce something back. Now Omnispell Adept is not technically a finisher for the deck, but you may cast an instant or sorcery without paying its mana cost for a 3-mana activation. You get this down for 5, then you have to go for a 3-mana activation. So it is a little pricey, but if this can stick around on the battlefield and you have your deck set up in a certain way, you can get some really nice value from it. It's just typically not one of those spells you really want to run unless you have something set up perfectly for that. But it exists, and there's not a ton of blue creatures out there that have some really nice value, and that's definitely one of those cards. Now, one of the ways that blue can really get around and kind of have some really good stuff is by copying stuff. So we have Naaru. She has Flash, so whenever she enters the battlefield, we get to copy targeted instant or sorcery spell you control. Then we get to choose new copies for it. So let's say that we're running some sort of combat trick. We flash in Naaru, make a copy of that combat trick. And then also, it does have that nice wizard tribal bonus. So let's say we're running a lot of wizards in a deck, or we're building some sort of wizard tribal deck. The fact that we can simply just flash her in to be a tribal lord, and at the same time copy some sort of card draw spell, copy a counter spell, either way it's completely open. It's going to be a really nice 2-for-1 for whatever deck that you're building. Even if it's not focused on wizards, you still end up with a 3/3 creature on the battlefield out of the deal, which is always nice. Now, mirror image. You may have mirror image enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature that you control. This is a great way to take advantage of enter the battlefield effects. Let's say that we have something like Wind Reader Sphinx. I don't think that's legendary, but if it is, excuse me, I don't think it is. So you can have mirror image enter the battlefield as a copy of Wind Reader Sphinx. Even if a creature is legendary and you simply want to get that enter the battlefield effect, you can cast mirror image. It enters the battlefield as a copy of that. You get that enter the battlefield effect. You choose which legendary creature you want to keep, probably not the copy one, and the mirror image goes to the graveyard. So it's a really good utility card for any sort of blue deck that you're building, and it's not necessarily something that you have to throw into a control deck. You know, it's going to work well in your aggro deck, something like a Merfolk tribal deck. Being able to make a copy of some lords is always really good. So it's just one of those really good universal cards. You just need to make sure that your deck can really take advantage of it before you run it, because basically you're limited to the creatures that you have on the battlefield. So you want to make sure you get some good creatures to take advantage of mirror image. Pretty cool card. Now, one of the ways that blue can really get ahead on board state, board advantage, is by getting tokens on the battlefield. Now, Sai does require that you run a lot of artifacts in your deck, but whenever you cast an artifact spell, we get to create a 1/1 Thopter token. That's always good. Then you do have that 2-mana activation of sacrificing 2 artifacts to draw a card. So you've kind of got this little token generator and an also card advantage source. Really, like, it does require you to run a few mana rocks in there, but if you can get down Sai and you can start casting a bunch of artifacts, you know, if you're building a Tezzeret deck, works out beautiful in Tezzeret deck. Feels good. And then Murmuring Mystic. This is, if you have one wild card to spin for blue, Murmuring Mystic is it. I love this card. It's 4 mana. It's a 1/5. You get it down. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you get a 1/1 blue bird creature token. One of the ways that blue likes to win is by sitting back and just kind of trying to control the board state. So we can sit back, get down Murmuring Mystic. Let's say we have counter spells, we have some instant speed card draw. So we get down Murmuring Mystic. We're still keeping on theme with our game plan. But as the game wears on, if they don't have an answer for Murmuring Mystic, we can sit there and get a ton of bird tokens on the battlefield. And that's going to be the way that you slowly close the game out. You're going to be able to send creatures back to your opponent's hand. You start swinging in with 2 birds a turn, 3 birds a turn, 4 birds a turn. Next thing you know, you've whittled away at your opponent's life total and you've won the game simply just sitting with Murmuring Mystic on the battlefield and casting your instant and sorceries. So, highly recommend getting this one. If you only get one card out of this video, get this one. Being able to get those bird tokens going, it's just one of the best feelings in the world. Plus, it makes Niv Mizzet happy when you get Frankie on the battlefield. Some other good things that blue is known for is going to be card advantage. So we have Riverwise Augur, enters the battlefield. This is kind of like your brainstorm Merfolk. Enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards, and put 2 cards back on top of your library. Now, depending if you have any sort of way to shuffle your library, what you can do with Riverwise is have Riverwise enter the battlefield, draw 3 cards, put 2 cards on top, and then if you have a shuffle effect, you can kind of shuffle those cards away. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. And then we also have Omen Speaker. Enters the battlefield, scry 2. So this is kind of your standard, just utility, early game value creature. And getting that scry is always nice. It's not like Surveil, but you know, having a 1/3 that's going to give you enough time to either A, protect a planeswalker, or just kind of build up enough time to where you can get some of your mana rocks down, and then kind of go for the long game control game. And plus that scry really does help. Now, moving on to also some more card draw, we have Mystic Archaeologist. That's going to be a 5 mana activation to draw 2 cards. That may seem like a lot of mana, but when you're playing a singleton format, you're running a lot of mana rocks, you get to late game, you know, both you and your opponent have exhausted your hand, you pretty much almost kind of in some sort of top deck mode. Being have some sort of mana sink late game to draw cards is a great way to pull ahead of your opponent. And for 5 mana to draw 2 cards off of a creature, pretty good. It is a little weak. It is a 2 mana 2/1. It's got to stick around for a while to get there. But you know, you draw this late game, you get it down. If you have 7 mana, you can at least get 2 cards out of it in response to some sort of removal spell. Then if they don't have a removal spell late game, you can just simply keep drawing cards, and hopefully that'll help you kind of close the game out. Now, Arcanus is not technically card draw, but it's going to help you kind of push your instant and sorceries. Get this down for 2 mana. Having some sort of mana dork for instant and sorcery spells, there's not a lot of them out there in Magic, so thankfully we do have something in the Curtain Arena. We'll be able to add 1 colorless mana to our mana pool, and we spend this mana to cast an instant or sorcery, so it's going to allow you to just basically get a turn ahead on whatever sort of counter spells or sort of tempo plays you're looking to go for with Arcanus. Now, some of the utility creatures that blue has, that's going to be bouncing creatures back to your opponent's hand. So we have Exclusion Mage. Enters the battlefield, return target creature and opponent controls to its owner hand. That's basically, you're playing Singleton, you want to have some sort of 2-for-1, and going for tempo plays like this is a great way to set up a later turn. So let's say that your opponent has a certain spell, you want to counter that spell, you get down Exclusion Mage, bounce that creature back to their hand, you can set up a card draw source, and then you're good to go going forward. So you can definitely use Exclusion Mage as kind of a way to kind of set up something a couple turns later, or simply just bounce back a creature to your opponent's hand to buy some time before they kill you, which is always nice. Siren Storm Tamer, it has flying, it has a 1 blue mana activation of counter target spell or ability that targets a creature you control. Nothing too crazy about this card other than it's just going to protect, eventually if they do put Brawl onto Arena, it's going to be a great way to protect your actual commander for the deck, or simply just kind of protect your big threat. Let's say we have Dream Eater on the battlefield. We want to make sure he sticks around. So we have Siren Storm Tamer. We go for that activation. We can counter that spell or ability. And the fact that it's a spell or ability really kind of helps you protect that, can also protect you from some sort of removal spell, and it can also protect you for something like a Ravenous Chupacabra. So definitely one of those good utility creatures. And then last but not least, we have some of the flyers for the deck that really get some sort of, it's a great way to attack your opponent's life total and get some value. So we have Night Veil Sprite, and whenever it attacks, Surveil for 1. 2 mana, 1/2, nothing to write home about, but that effect is nice. It's kind of like the Merfolk Looter in Commander. It's just a 2 mana card advantage source. It gives you something to do while you're waiting to get to turns 4, 5, 6, and stuff like that. And we also have Zahid. Probably going to be running some sort of artifact in your Arena deck, in your Singleton deck. So the fact that you can get down this 5/6 flyer for only 4 mana with an artifact, that is definitely a good way to kind of get some early game pressure on your opponent, at the same time kind of sit back with some counter spells and really protect Zahid or really attack your opponent's life total. But that's going to be it for the blue creatures. Unfortunately, there's not a ton of really good creatures. So if you're planning on building blue or playing blue in Arena Singleton, you definitely want to either splash another color, or if you want to build a little bit more of a heavier Planeswalker focus once you splash those colors. But that's going to be it for the video. If you enjoyed it, like and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.